Good evening, everyone. Hi, welcome to another one of the evenings with the online accelerated postgraduate support program. My name is Professor Tennyson Mukuchini. Welcome to one of our blast sessions. You will remember that we've been doing a fair amount of the sessions that were assisting those writing up their proposals. We did some that look at people who are developing their dissertations and their theses. We have also had some sessions that looked at how to write for publication. And of course, along with this, there's another key competence that many of you need during your course of study, but will certainly need after you've studied. And it is to do with this skills related to writing for grants. So they call that practice grantmanship. So this session that we have a couple of sessions tonight and tomorrow. They are, we've titled them appropriately as the A to Z of grantmanships. And basically what this session does is it walks you through a step-by-step process of how you develop your work towards completion of a proposal that would be used to apply for a grant. Now, many of you will ask, what is the purpose of this to me? Folks, there are some of us who are lucky enough to earn bursaries, and those bursaries are given by universities without much question about your topic, but more times than not, the bursary is barely enough to really support your study. And most of the students from traditional universities, you know, the red brick face-to-face universities, always complement their bursary with a grant. Unfortunately, at UNISA, we have the legacy of people who have traditionally not applied for grants or applied and not been successful. So just as a comparative, students from some of the leading research universities will have success rates where out of 37 applications for grants, 35 of the students get grants. Whereas sometimes, unfortunately, within the UNISA context, we have the exact opposite. So out of 35 applicants, 2 successfully receive grants. And that number will rise, can easily rise from 2 to 35 if people are formally trained about how to write for a grant. And these 2 sessions are the sessions that will attend to that limit. And to all of you as students, remember there are countless opportunities for additional money to support your studies. The issues are around how you identify, locate them, and also how you submit something that will really run in competition with any other well-prepared student. So the absolute intention of these 2 sessions is to get you into that space. Now, before we can engage on that, I will share some of the administrative arrangements for tonight. As always, the session will be run with my face turned off while I present. The video part of this will be turned off while I present, so we don't affect the bandwidth of your reception. Then, of course, at the end, I will look through the chat and respond to questions, and at that point, I'll turn myself on again. Now, sorry, I must apologize. I have shared a different part of my screen, right? Okay, just for the purposes of clarity, you will know, or at least it should be understood, that the game or the challenges associated with grant writing get easier the more of it you do. And it's a funny space in that it's one of those areas where people who have written grants, and who have successfully submitted grants tend to be the very same people who win one grant after the other. So you will, you will look through the world of academia, and you will find that you have academics who will say they've had, throughout their careers, they've had grants that add up to 50,000 Rand. Then you will find someone else who has grants that add up to 44 million or something of that nature. So the absolute rule with this is that once you do it well and you kind of get into it, you then suddenly realize that your journey in academia, both as a student and anything else, can be entirely funded by the grant world if you position yourself. That means allows you the ability to do your study to its best ability, to do all the wonderful things that are required within a study. For example, to be able to appropriately compensate participants who come and show up to your studies by being able to reimburse them for monies that they lose when they're coming to participate in your study. All those things are very possible with grants. And of course, the other thing with this grant world is that there is no single manual that tells you how to do it. The best bet is to speak to those who have applied for many grants before and who have successfully won grants. So you're just fortunate as a group that previous to my job at UNISA, I was a professor in the States, and in America, the basic only way to survive is you actually fund your job through writing grants. So I when I kind of convert the money back to rands, I think I've probably earned about, I have successfully won grants that total 141 million Rand. So it's a lot of money, but it doesn't come to me. It's for the purposes of running the work I do. So similarly, this project that we're in now is a grant, and it is a grant that's worth, over the course of the 3-year period, it's worth in excess of 20 million Rand. So you can see that there is scope, but that scope really depends on you getting an understanding of what grants, what reviewers of grant applications look for, and positioning yourself. At this stage, as students, the type of grants you apply for are, for the most part, to support you to complete your studies. So we've got this as a 2-part session, and basically it walks you through how the do's and don'ts of successful project grant proposal. I will speak to you about the content expectations, the things that should be in it, and I will speak to you about the process, because this journey, when you apply for grants, it is much about doing the right thing doing the right things with the right thing, and I will explain what I mean by that. So it's as much about the process that you follow as it is to do with the content of what you submit. So and often people are strong in one part and not the other. So you have people who have great content, a great idea, great proposal, but they don't put it through the process expectation, so they fall on the basis of weak process. And then some people follow process, but they actually have a weak product. And the idea really today is to support you through developing something that is good in both ends. Now, much of what project grant proposal writing depends on is pre-existing knowledge. So as I speak to you now, those of you who have attended most, if not all, the sessions we've presented up to this point are actually ready. You have the content readiness to submit a grant. You just have to be helped to shapen it, to sharpen it, to shape it, to create things that speak to the world of grants reviewers. And part of that involves me just going back to some pretty basic pieces of information that you already know or should know, or you have met at least, and assure you that actually the grant writing that we're talking about relies heavily on things that you know already. It's just assisting you to custom make them to the journey of grant writing. So the first, when you talk about a grant or an application for a grant, the actual tool, as it were, the bullet, if we were talking about this as being a gun, the actual bullet that you fire when you submit grants is this magical proposal. And of course, you as students have met the term proposal, and you have met that term in the context of your proposal for your dissertation and as a proposal for your thesis. So I want to show you that the proposal for a grant is quite similar. It just differs because it's aiming to extract a different type of interest from its reader. But essentially, a research project proposal is defined as a systematically formatted, detailed statement of intent of the researcher, which presents and justifies a plan of action and shows the investigation plan. So if you take, and those of you who've been around the sessions that are presented, you know we spend a fair amount of time just looking at the definition of the journey in front of us. And you will know that the first thing about a good definition is if you embrace all the concepts that are buried in it and the logic of how you proceed with whatever it is we're looking at becomes clearly spelled out for you. So the first thing is that there's a systematic formatting expectation for a proposal. So do not get into even trying to present a proposal until you have identified from whoever the person who has requested the proposal is, what format they require from you. And that format talks to how they want you to submit the package that is the proposal, what are the subheading expectations, and so forth and so forth. Then the next thing that you remember is this detail. And that detail means that everything that crosses your mind in relation to the plan that you have must be represented in a proposal. So many people will have things where they will say, look, I'm going to do a literature review. But they know that actually in that literature review, they're going to do several things. They're going to search for literature. They will develop a data search strategy. They will find a way of eliminating out the literature that they don't want. Then the literature that they do have, they'll collate it into themes. They'll do this. So that those steps that I've defined are the detail that one would have in a proposal. Instead of simply saying, I'm going to write a literature review, you give a detail of what that writing a literature review story is, if it is something that you think could be interpreted differently by different people. So that's the detailed statement of intent, that every part of this is hinged on you giving detail. And another thing that is not explicitly mentioned here is that, folks, when you write for a research proposal, your ultimate goal is to get the other person to give you money. So whether we like it or not, the actual process of grant writing is heavily driven by people's mindsets when they're exchanging money. So one of the mindsets when you exchange money is that people will say, I will not give you my money unless I understand what you're doing with it. So essentially, the issue about proposal writing for the context of grant expectations has to do with you writing in a way that would convince someone to believe that there is for someone to believe that there is value for money in them giving you access to this grant that they have. So critically, the critical part of this is the ability to offer a plan that has enough detail to convince the reviewer that you should be awarded the money, you sufficiently understand what's involved in the job that you're saying you're going to do. And of course, apart from the content being worthy of money, you yourself are a worthy individual. So those are quite substantially different considerations from, say, a proposal you would do for a master's or doctoral thesis. Because ultimately, when you submit your master's or when you submit your proposal for a master's or for a doctorate, none of it is about whether we want to trust you with the money or not. All of it is to do with whether we think there's scholarly merit in what you're doing. So that change in emphasis changes quite a fair amount. So that detail that we're speaking about is not just detail for the sake of detail. It's detail for the sake of showing the person who is giving you the money that, hey, this is the extent of what's involved. I know exactly what's involved. And because I've detailed it clearly, my costing of what I want from you is reliable because I know the journey involved. So there's a lot of hidden agendas that come with, or there's a lot of expectation that's buried in this detailed statement of intent that I'm talking about. Of course, the way that you would communicate that those intents that you have or action plans that you have is you present them through an action plan. So you would say, you know, this is the proposal, I will do this, I will do that, I will do that. One of the key thing around the presentation for this is that everything that you present needs to be justified. So in a proposal where you're asking for money, you don't just say, I'm going to collect data, please give me 20,000 for that. You would have to say, I'm collecting data and this is a justification for this activity existing within the project. So that justification part is important. And of course, you also have to make judgments when you write about what deserves to be justified and what doesn't. And maybe the best way to coach you about this is to just draw your attention to generic social behavior. And if you think about our own actions as human beings, that when you do something that is considered quote unquote normal and is middle of the road behavior, which is quite typical of what everyone else around you is doing, you don't have to justify it. But the minute you do anything that's a little bit out of the normal, then you must justify it. So the compulsion and the requirement for justification increases as one deviates from the expected norm. So similarly, with research, the rules, or with proposals, the rules are the same. And say, for example, if you were someone who woke up at 7 a.m. in the morning and you went to bed at 10 at night, and someone said, what are your sleeping patterns? And you told them, you would not necessarily, no one would look at you and expect you to justify why you wake up at a time when most of the world wake up at, why you go to bed at a time when everyone pretty much goes to bed. But if you were to say, hey, I wake up at 2 a.m. and I go to bed at 3 o'clock, 3 a.m., you would find that the requirement for you to rationalize why you do these things that are out of the norm is increased by virtue of the fact that the things you're doing are out of the norm. So similarly, this whole story of justification of your plan of action uses similar rules of engagement. And those rules are: justify to the reader any action that you are proposing which falls out of what the norm would be. Then, of course, you have to detail an investigation plan. So this is just without even going 2 or 3 steps beyond this. We know that a research project proposal is about asking for money. It is about presenting a problem that needs to be understood, and that presentation requires you to make sure that it's systematically formatted, that it details your intent explicitly, and in detailing that, you present and justify your actions, and of course you develop and share that as part of an action plan. That is literally where the story begins. So just for the purposes of naming protocols, grant proposals are sometimes called grant proposals. Sometimes people will have a call for proposals and they'll say, please give us a research outline. They'll say, give us a synopsis of your research, the plan of your research, your thesis plan. All of those are really about, they're the same thing. They're a blueprint of future activities that you have planned in relation to your specified research topic. And then, of course, they give a preconceived framework for implementation of your research activities. So what you're saying is that a research proposal provides, it's a conception in the form of a framework that tells people how you intend to undertake what you want to undertake as far as research activities are concerned. And a much more detailed understanding of it is the fact that, you know, in a proposal, you will tell the readers what you want to do, what the objectives and methodologies that you've chosen are, the resources that you believe are required to complete it, and then, of course, how you intend to share these findings. All of this is typically the research process. Once again, this definition travels very similar ground from similar ground to what I have discussed. So once again, folks, just a reminder is that when you are writing grant proposals, the issue is about asking for money, essentially. So we need to understand what patterns of behavior, what types of presentation, what content organization strategies differentiate something that succeeds and from something that fails. Literally, if we're talking about money, we can equate it to differentiating between a beggar who will ask you for money on the street and not get it, and one who will ask for money on the street and receive it. Because ultimately, the differentiating factor is, or the key thing is, that you are requesting money. So, and knowing the good and the bad is very, very, knowing the good and the bad about proposals writings is so critical. It's probably on a scale of 1 to 5, where the most important thing is rated as number 1. It probably sits at number 1, hey? Because the question often isn't whether people have background knowledge to write a proposal. The question often is to do with the fact that people do not have the right skills to make good use of their background. or of their interests to a point where it has potential to earn them some money. So what happened, and this is just a point of note, but in the world globally, there are many places that apply for grants, and interestingly, there are particular places that are associated with very successful grant applications. And in that space, the nation of India, as in India, the country, has the most successful project grant proposals at any one time. So allegedly up to 73 of all their grant applications will end up being successful. So internal, external, everywhere. So 3 out of 4 people in India who apply for any type of grant are more likely to win that grant. And how they win them is actually they have turned it into a science. They have a very specific science, and the science of grantsmanship. And part of what that scientific interest has done is it has studied cause and effect relationships, the types of things that tell them very explicitly that this type of grant application behavior can result in this outcome. And what they've done is they've found the 10 great things that all grant proposals that are successful do, 10 descriptors. Of course, it would be expected that the failing and unsuccessful grant applications will be all these 10 things turned backwards. But here, for the purposes of you being clear that you must have a 10 point aspiration list, 10 things that you want your proposal to have so that it really has a good running for whatever opportunity you've applied for. Interestingly, these same 10 things are exactly the same 10 things that they're exactly the same as the 10 things that good dissertations, good theses, good proposals have. And what they tell us is that actually the requirements of effective grant writing are no different from those of other projects that are not grant applications, with the exception of one thing, which in front on your screen is number 10. The focus on itemizing what you want to do and so forth is clearly less of an issue within a scholarly master's and a scholarly doctorate. But in terms of the world of grant application, it is critical. So the 10 things, the must-dos, are that you need every grant proposal, everything that is research. If you remember that this research is about the study of a systematic study of a phenomena or a problem. So if you want something that's in the research world to have the respect it deserves, it needs to have a clearly conceptualized problem. So the thing that you're focusing on has to be explicit. If you think about the specific world of grantmanship, remember, people are giving you money often to assist in providing some knowledge that would help to fix an existing problem. So this idea that you need to have a clearly conceptualized problem is critical, because all the rationale for doing anything in research starts from you identifying a worthy problem that needs to be understood. So successful projects have very clearly conceptualized problems, very clearly conceptualized focus areas. Then, of course, the second thing is you need to have an accurate alignment between the identified problem and the terms of reference of the proposal call. So every grant tends to have an advertisement. They'll have an advertisement that clearly says, hi, we are looking for grants that focus on A, B, C, D. You must make sure that your application is explicitly aligned with whatever the call was. So the idea that you would just have heard that this company has a call and the person you sent the application to is so and so, you cannot reliably write a proposal when you have such sparse information about what the detail of the proposal call. What is the subject they're interested in, or what are the types of proposal they consider, what are the minimum requirements that they have. All those things are needed. So you need to have, and you need those to be able to establish an accurate alignment. Then thirdly, scientifically justified subject focus. So remember, every problem that you decide is a problem doesn't automatically become a problem just because you decided or your friends or someone you know felt that it was problematic. It becomes a problem because it's been supported not only by your anecdotal observations, but by the literature, local literature, national literature, continental literature, global literature. So you must make sure that whatever problem you choose as the basis and focus of your proposal has to have very clear evidence backing it up as a problem, one that is serious enough to deserve attention. Then, of course, the next thing is, yes, we now have this problem. Point 4 is we need to have a clear, researchable, and aligned aim and objectives. So you must be clear that as much as you have now identified what the problem is, you must tell us what exactly you want to understand about that problem and what steps, i.e. the objectives that you will follow to pursue that aim that you've identified. Remember, with that objectives, if the objectives are not spelled out clearly, then the actions that you write, the budget that you will claim, all fall flat because all of them are dependent on a particular, they all fall flat because they are all dependent on you having addressed the problem in a very particular and scientifically sound way. Then the fifth requirement is that, look, many organizations that give grants give them because they are trying to establish themselves or reinforce their presence as socially responsible entities. So when Mercedes-Benz gives a grant to students, they're doing it because they want the world to see that, look, we're interested in students. We believe students have important subjects. We want to be socially responsible and support them. So that whole obsession with a clear social imperative, clear topicality of your problem. The problem must be current, it must be here, it must be now, it must be something that really keeps particular spaces within society unhappy, feeling under or poorly understood all that time. It needs to meet the social imperative dimension and meet it well. Then the next thing is you need to have a research plan that's clearly rationalized, so it should make sense, should be well justified, i.e. you defend the things you do, and then parsimonious. I've mentioned this word parsimonious before, but I'll mention it again. And parsimonious refers to you being frugal, being able to actually work to the minimum use the minimum energy to achieve what you need to achieve. So parsimony relates to having a research plan that is not wasteful. That we know, we realize that you recognize that if you have 100 participants and you want to find out what they think about a certain topic, you could use sampling that might tell you that you only need to speak 60 to 67 of them, rather than deciding that you'll speak to all 100, because that becomes wasteful. Then the next thing is all the successful projects have clear incremental golden thread that's between the key project proposal aspects. And so what we mean by golden thread is that the study, the way you think it up, the way you shape the problem, the plans you have for addressing the problem, and all those things need to actually make chronological sense and appear to be logically deduced ways of doing things. So I should expect that if you devise, tell me what the problem is, you will shape the problem in such a way that it makes it very obvious then what the aim of your study or the aim of your project is. And if you've got the aim, then the objectives must follow in line with that, so that you really have a storyline that is consistent, and that it speaks to one problem, it identifies solutions that relate to the problem, it identifies activities that relate to the problems that relate to the foundational question, and so forth. Then, of course, you need to have clear feasibility considerations. Not every study that one wants to do is doable. And proposal applications need to get a very strong sense that you understand what can be done and what can't be done. And that is basically how you differentiate dreamers from those who are realistic in their planning and development of proposals. Then there is an expectation with many a grant opportunity that individuals will be able to demonstrate a relationship between what their proposal do and improvements in practice. So if you're going to do a proposal on subject A, one would expect that as a result of that proposal, we will be able to see demonstrable changes in the way other people practice in your field, so your work will improve the way that things are done and exercised in your field. So that's point one. Then there's this imperative, and this imperative people know less about, but it's actually a very serious point winner. If you have it in your proposal, you win many points. And this is to do with the skills capacity extension potential. And skills capacity really refers in very basic terms, is that, look, when you do a proposal or you ask for money to do a proposal, those who give you money get a lot of benefit from knowing that apart from you helping to understand the problem, the journey that you devise for your proposal and for your project is created in such a way that you use people who might be currently developing themselves, so you can extend their skills. You basically look for members of the community that would appropriately benefit from being involved in your project, and you make them the center of your project. So some people will do this through saying, look, when I apply for this grant, I'm going to also say I want to have funds to be able to support 2 or 3 people to do a master's, and that master's will be speaking to the topic I'm talking to. So I'm skilling people while I'm attending to the problem. Some people will say, no, actually, I can't do formal skills extension, but what I might commit to is committing to the fact that all the data collectors in my study or that are related to this proposal I'm writing will be people that are recruited from the disadvantaged community that I will be working with. That really shows that, hey, you've actually thought in bigger terms about how to use or make meaningful use of grant monies should you get them. Then the final success descriptor is this thing of budget, that every cent you ask for, you have to have a reasonable justification for why you're asking for that. So some people will just, in a grant application, they'll have a section that says budget, and next to it they put literature review, 200,000, data collection, 500,000, and grant holders and owners of grants don't really approve of that way of writing, because they recognize that when you write a literature review, there's like maybe 15 distinct activities that you do, and rather than them just give you 200,000 for that literature review, they want to understand what components make that 200,000. So, and unless you have a proposal application that specifically highlights how smaller sections of the budget are intended to be spent and so forth, you rate much lower than someone who does it. So these are the 10 must-do things. Of course, you will notice that the next slide tells you what the 10 things you should not do are. And if you look at that, those 10 things are exactly the opposite of the 10 that were success imperatives. And I will just hold on to this for 2 seconds, just to allow you the opportunity to see it. There is no need for me to run through these, because they are literally the absence of the other 10. That if you either have a poor budget and you don't explain what's going on, or if you are choosing a subject because you have personal interest and you've placed that personal interest over the social benefits of what the study would be. Maybe you're wasteful in the way you've written or promised to do things within your research plan. All those things. Once you have those, all these do not do happening, then we know that you are likely to have a proposal that is not going to succeed. Of course, along with that is some additional observations that are made once again about sets of people who actually write research that looks specifically at what it takes to succeed as a grant writer versus what mistakes people make. So some of the issues that are commonly seen as mistakes is that people have problems in demonstrating the significance of the topic. So, and by that, they fail to actually specify what the problem is that they're interested in looking at, and what the importance of attending and addressing that problem is, and the fact that any failure to address the problem would have significant detrimental effects to whatever population they are focusing on. Secondly, apart from it not being clear why the fuss with this topic, people tend to struggle with actually having specific aims and intentions that speak to this problem. So either the aim is too ambitious, or they propose work that seems unreasonable to propose, but they're trying to impress those that are giving money. But once again, those of you who understand how money works, the person who gives you or is intending to give you money has a sense of how much that money can achieve. So sometimes people want to overshoot the promises as a way of saying, look, I know you've asked for 10 rands, but I will promise you 50 rands worth of work. unfortunately, what happens is the readers see that discrepancy and they think all sorts of things about you being incapable of planning. They say you are incapable or you are dishonest at worst, because you are promising to do things that will seem clearly not possible to do within the amount of money that you have linked to the request. Of course, some people have uncertain future directions about what they are hoping their study will do going forward. All those things are quite significant mistakes. There is, of course, additional respects that are related to the world of implementation. So people don't give the level of detail of what they want to do in the way we expect it. They don't have control. So sometimes people will say, look, I want a study that will assess this. But they do need to think about whether there is a way of actually developing a control of that study so that they can see what the absence of the intervention they are looking at may look like. These are kind of the other common mistakes in terms of the methodologies used. Then, of course, we can never underestimate that some of the weaknesses in proposals are to do with the perception of what type of investigator you give the reviewers. And if you give the reviewers the sense that you have limited expertise, limited understanding of the available approaches, you have recently proven yourself to be underproductive, or are promising to do something with too little resource. All of these things become things to do with problematic or suspicious personnel. Then, of course, with you as students in the world you're in, there's always, before a grant is given or awarded, there's always questions about whether or not people are within an environment that would support this. So if when you write a grant, you have to be explicit about the fact that you are a student from X university and the facilities that university holds will be available to you to use going forward because you are a member of that entity. So those are the initial awaken you up type of things when it relates to proposal writing and so forth. Now what we'll do is I want to proceed on to elements of the actual act of writing the proposal. So now I've told you the do's, the don'ts, what goes wrong, what goes right, and so forth. Now, this is a step-to-step guide on how you conceptualize a grant proposal to you completing it. I won't walk through all the steps tonight, but I want to begin a little bit about getting to sensitize you in terms of this world of grant writing and getting the right type of grant ready. So you will remember that I have said that the whole world of grant writing is really, or the project proposal is a culmination of you using the building blocks of research in the research process. So people take little elements of the research process and use them to build a proposal. So clearly, an understanding of what research is important because it outlines the building block. It outlines that, so if you understand what research and the nature of research investigations are, then in essence, you have the tools to actually embark on writing an appropriate project proposal. So once again, if you look at this, you will see that the definitions of research mention systematic. They talk once again about rigor. Rigor being the fact that you are able to see what you're wanting to do and subject it to 20 years to many other alternative views, so that whatever you present has been sort of tested by yourself to make sure that it's as foolproof as possible. Then, of course, we speak about the logic of all research activities, that they need to be founded in a logical approach, then they are always intended to answer questions, understand problems in relation to a phenomena of interest. So that's the first. The second definition by law beyond says the same, but I think all I'm trying to say is that the journey of proposal writing within grants is a baby of the research journey. So everything that we've prioritized in research about being systematic, rigorous, being disciplined in the way you search for truth, making choices that are weighed against other choices, recognizing that every choice and step you make is a series of thoughtful decisions about all the different alternatives that are there. All of that is what we know as foundational assumptions in research, but because of the relationship between the research process and the grant development process, these assumptions are then the same assumptions that grant proposal writers have and operate by. We've spoken once again, I've said that this journey about grant writing is literally about giving money. So when people give money, they want to know that you have a means to get to the end in the shortest way. So the rule absolute, the rule that is non-wavering in the world of grant writing is this rule to do with the fact that you must be parsimonious. You have to save, you have to be frugal, you have to be thoughtful and avoid wasteful options when you're planning out your proposal, or for that fact your planning out the study that you will carry out. So parsimony is central to everything. Now, when you are developing a proposal, this proposal that you are talking about in relation to a project or in relation to a bursary is similarly positioned to a proposal you would do for your dissertation, for your thesis, but there are certain things that are much more sharply represented. The issues around you being explicit about what it is you want to do and how much it will cost. And that has a lot to do with the nature of proposal that we are talking about here. But the first thing is that there are certain numbers of questions that researchers need to ask, or applicants need to ask in preparation for this project that they need to do, for this proposal that they need to do for a grant. The first thing is, remember, every grant that you apply for has to be in response to an identified call. So if there is a specific advertisement that says we are looking for grants that are about this, then you ask yourself, how do I have a potential project that speaks to this thing? And that is to do with ensuring alignment between what you want to propose and what is being asked for. So that's a separate and distinct but very clear, important precursor to what I have on the screen here. But when you've got what you have on, you have ascertained that yes, the invitation to submit a proposal is indeed related to the topic that I want to focus on. Then the things that you do are ask several questions. Firstly is you ask what the problem is, that you articulate for the reader what the problem is that you are looking at, wanting to study, and you represent that through elements such as your selection and statement of the problem. And the key elements of that will be things like problem identification, how you justify the problem, how you prioritize the problem as something that is worthy of attention, and by inference worthy of being afforded this money that goes behind the grant call. You also then carry out, ordinarily you would carry out a literature review to look at what information is already available in relation to the problem you're interested in. And the format in which you look at the problem is the same. You want to know what is currently understood, what represents areas that need further understanding, what parts of this represent areas where the problem is still very poorly understood and needs to be understood further. The idea with this literature review is that it becomes the place that you use as a foothold to show that, hey, here the literature shows that this area is important. The literature shows that this area is deserving of further research. The literature shows that there are things in this area that continue to be contested and are things that need to be studied. And because of that, I am now proposing a project in which I will look at issue X, issue Y, and that is the why you're doing this or conducting this study. So the literature review becomes the precursor that you use and rely on to give justification for your study. Once you have done that, all the other elements of your work then become the plan, the basic plan of how you intend to carry out the study, how you collect the data, and all the different things to do with the variables you're interested in. The very straightforward things which many of you should now be strong at because as students of formal master's and doctoral study, these are part of what you call your research methodology. The only thing with this type of research methodology writing is that you give all detail that has the ability to have a cost implication, you must indicate, because it is the basis upon which you will later be developing a budget. Of course, your methodology methodology element has got all this information about who will collect data and when. You will develop a work plan in relation to it. How will this, and the other big thing with proposals is, remember, when money is given, much is asked about from those who have been given the money to be able to administer that money, to monitor how it is used, and so forth. So you need to develop a plan that actually has an inbuilt monitoring and evaluation element that ensures that when you write your proposal, you're telling people that, look, when you give me your money, these are the things I will do, but I have these systems that will monitor that I'm doing the right things with your money. Then, of course, in the story of explaining how you're going to treat the money, there's an expectation for you to indicate explicitly what resources are needed. And that's where the issue of budget is represented. And then finally, in your development process of the proposal, remember there's your readiness about, the clarity you have to give about who will submit, how you will submit your proposal, and where and when. And that goes back to that very explicit issue where I said you need to be clear about the process elements and the content elements of a project proposal, of a project proposal journey. You need to have the content right, you need to have the process right. So I have very quickly gone through what the content kind of covers. I will speak to certain bits as I proceed with the presentation, but also there is the how, the fact that there is a process that is necessary in understanding. There's a process that should be followed. Now, I have already spoken in detail about the different uh, expectations of a grant proposal, that it's meant to convince the reader that you've identified an important topic, an important problem that needs to be understood, that you have the competence to carry it out, and you have a plan that is detailed, researched, and appropriate. Those are the things. Then, of course, we know that this will be evaluated. So that evaluation requires that, firstly, all the scholarly requirements of a proposal should be there. But importantly, all the things that detail the cost implications of a project should also be there, because when you ask for money, the reviewers need to know exactly what elements of that proposal will cost and what money you've allocated to them. So regardless of what your research area is, what your methodology is, there are specific questions that your research proposal must speak to. What you plan to achieve by doing this thing, why you want to do it, and those are all the things about the problem, the prioritization, how you're going to do it, and of course, finally, the value add of you doing it. So now the next thing that I do, and I do this very briefly, hey, I just want to be quick now with this. It'll probably take another 5 minutes to get through this element before we pause with phase 1 of this presentation. So folks, the grant proposal is exactly in every shape and form the same as all the other proposals, you know. But the issue is, firstly, that you want your research problem to be explicitly stated much faster. You also have to show the person that you have the competence to undertake this thing. And of course, that whole issue about the financial value add of what you propose. Is this financially worth what you are claiming it is as far as your application is concerned? So similarly, the grant proposal has the same thing as a title. It should be concise and descriptive. Folks, with grant proposals, the titles tend to be much more scientific rather than populist. So, you know, some people have a title that will be like a popular catchphrase from the front of a newspaper. In grant proposals, we don't go with that. You give titles that indicate, in scientific terms, the independent and dependent variables, the concepts that you're interested in, if it's a qualitative thing. So you'd have a study that says, you know, an exploration of triggers of relapse in alcohol users or something, but it should be clear rather than something a bit more sensationalized just for the media. Of course, the abstract, they will tell you, each call will say the abstract should be this, but typically there are 300 words or so, and they basically ask for you to give an overview of the background of the problem, some sense of the aims that come from this problem, the objectives, the intended methodologies for data collection, and so forth. In a proposal to do with the grant, the introduction is set to frame the problem, to really capture the sensational big issues around the problem. And you need, whatever your research focus is, you need to give enough of enough content to show its connection to something that is much more critically important in real life. So say if your study is about, I don't know, it's about catalysts in the what's this chemical engineering world. When you write for this proposal, you would have to go back and say, how do I frame this issue of catalysts in a way that would make sense to a reviewer who is not a chemist? So you might say, hey, but these catalysts are the same catalysts that allow us to produce petrol very quickly. So when you're writing up your problem, you could start by acknowledging that the world have a consistent problem with fuels. And part of the problem is that we are finishing fuels much faster than we're making them. And we have a reliance on inventions within the chemical world, such as catalysts, to be able to keep up. That has located the problem in such a way that anybody who's not a chemist can see the immediate connection. Then secondly, from just framing the research problem, you need to give a good historical background that places the issue you're looking at in the here and now, but acknowledges who has contributed to what we know, who are the key players in this field, what are the key arguments, what are the things that need to be understood. I have detailed for your own guidance the sort of things that you generally would expect to see in an introduction. The research problem will be stated, you'll give a context and set the stage for the thing that you're interested in studying, present a rationale for why this must be studied and why it is worth doing, describe some of the major issues and problems that your research will look at, identify the issues that are of importance and the things that you will study, and what the primary outcome measure you'll be interested in is. You would give some sense of what it is that you are going to use as your method to better understand these things. And of course, you set the delimitations or boundaries of your study. What is the scope? What this proposal you're presenting, where does it start and where does it end? Then, of course, you clarify anything that people might not have understood. Now, the next phase, the next bits of pieces that I have here are literally extracted from one of your sessions that I did with you many weeks ago, where I say to you, look, when you are developing a proposal, a proposal for a grant, it is literally the same process as you would conceive a proposal for your formal course of study, that you have a phase of conception in which you start to think, refine the problem, and you rethink it, you theorize, and so forth. So this I've inserted here just to give you a flashback connection between this work and the work that you've already done. Similarly, I tell you a little bit, I revisit how you conceptualize a problem. So if you remember that ultimately the strength or weakness of your proposal is determined by how solid or non-solid your problem that you focus on is. So if the problem that you focus on is a problem that is seriously presented, you show that it reaches everybody, it's not just a personally observed anecdotal experience, it's an issue that affects many people, the science supports it, then all that are the kind of steps that you go through to formulate a problem that is so substantial that it really deserves to have money invested in it. So, and that is ultimately what the relationship between, whether someone decides to be interested enough to give your research a focus, some money or not. Is the problem that you're offering to look at substantial enough, important to more than just you? Is this an issue that needs to be looked at globally? Then the next part, of course, is that, remember, with every proposal, we know you can confirm that a problem exists through numbers and statistics and so forth. But the particular angle of the problem that you interest yourself in is an angle that you can only justify through you looking broadly at the literature that's around and assessing that literature for certain things. Firstly, that you're not reinventing the wheel, that you're not studying something that has been studied before. You want the literature review to also showcase the things you know about the topic. You want it to showcase the fact that you realize what debates are out there. What is it that people are struggling with? You want to also show that it allow the reader to see that you use it to you use the literature review to put your problem into perspective. Once again, I've taken material from previous teaching that speaks to you about what literature reviews do, and I've posted it on here just as an additional part. Then, of course, there are steps to review. All these steps are very familiar to you. The issue about you determining what it is you want your literature review to find for you, what are the strategies you use to get the data you need, how did you figure out what themes were important, what themes are not, because it's all these things that eventually give you a substantial enough sense of what you want to do, what matters and what doesn't. In this whole story of literature reviews, I have thrown in this hierarchy of evidence, which all of you know or should know, because I speak about it a great many times, but I'll repeat it again. As you review literature, there should be in your head some understanding of the fact that not all literature that you look at is born the same, is of the same quality, same credibility. And the thing that helps you to determine this is a range of appraisal tools that help you to segregate good studies, good data sources from the ones that are not so good. And this one that you have in front of you is called Sackett's hierarchy of evidence. And people generally use it when they're looking at lots of data and wanting to make a decision about whether they believe the outcomes from expert opinion versus the outcomes, say, from systematic reviews. What this framework suggests to you is that the higher the type of evidence is on this pyramid, the more respectable, more convincing it should be seen. Now, okay, the method section, folks, this is the bit where, and students generally don't struggle with this, hey, because you are writing a proposal for people who are not predominantly researchers. They are funders, they have money, they fund you, but they don't specialize in research methodology. So you just have to, as best as you can, articulate how you plan to tackle the things you said you'll do. Provide a work plan that has all the critical things that allow people to see exactly what you're doing, who's going to do it, how long it will take, and if need be, what cost you have attached to each of these activities. And what you want to do is you want to have sufficient information for a reader to be able to read what you're reading and to make confident decisions about whether your methodology is sound. They should be able to read it and almost replicate what you want to do without you being in the room. Now that part, as I said, where you write out the methods is the equal of the research process, but where you elaborate on your research plan. You tell us how are you choosing participants, what are the methods you will use for data collection, what do you intend, what technologies are you going to rely on, and so forth. All of that is building a picture about your study. Now, I have put in some information which I will leave for now, because later on, when we do the second phase of this, I will walk you through some living examples of proposals, and you'll be able to deal with that. Remember, at the proposal stage, after you've got the methods, typically you would have a results section, but you don't have results at proposal stage. So you would what's the right word? You would offer thoughts about what your expectations are in relation to what data you expect to have, how you will manage that data, and what costs are implicated in your management of the data. So the results section is a projection of what you expect to do rather than things you have done. Then, of course, the discussion bit in any proposal of this nature is just you discussing what the potential of what you're offering will be and so forth. And this, folks, represents the proposal in its main body. There are things that follow after that, the issue around the budget development and all that stuff. And that is what we will focus on explicitly when we look at phase 2 of this journey. Once again, I revisit some of the common mistakes that are associated with proposal writing, people's inability to place their problem in a way that means something. Their failure to actually include the work of others and the research of others to guide their own, their failure to stay focused on what it is they said they would look at, and then, of course, that failure to establish a golden thread as is expected within any study. Now, right, this we can leave it. I think I've already made reference to that. And what I want to leave you with, and some of the expected, the structure of a proposal would look like this. But once again, I've said you need to go to the people who have offered it to you, and they will indicate, they will have documents that indicate that our grants must have this. But for you, this is what a kind of grant looks like, and it is exactly the same as a research proposal as you know it. The only difference will be the budget, the budgeting and justification of costs is a much more explicit step in this journey by comparison. So now, folks, we stop there for phase 1. Then phase 2, we will continue tomorrow, where we now really home in on the art of grantmanship. Now you know what the proposal in a grant looks like. But it isn't really just that content that matters. It is what you do with it. It's how you market it. It's how you defend financially the choices you've made. Then I will also direct you to some places. And before we leave for tonight, I want to find one slide that I want you to refer to as homework. And you... Right, folks, it's coming up. Please have a pen and paper or a camera or something so you can take a picture of this slide. It's coming. I want, okay, it's here somewhere, right? You will see in front of you, you've got a number of websites. I want you, out of all of this, I want you to take the first one, www.grants.gov, and please copy it as is. As a final parting shot for today, in advance of tomorrow, I want you to actually go and click on this or type it out for yourself and go to that site and look at the number. You'll be shocked at the number of grant opportunities. There's literally, at any one time, there's probably 45,000 grant opportunities. And at any one time, there's maybe 10 that you meet and would be appropriate for. And every student that I've ever taught grant writing who has applied for grants through grant.gov, after 6 or 7 applications, they get something. The issue is just looking, understanding, and knowing what to do. But I just want to open your eyes to this potential ahead of the session that we have tomorrow. Now, I am just going to come up here and take myself off that link and just turn on my camera once more in the hope that you can get a clearer sense of I can have a quick look at the questions. Now, we have a number of questions that are presented here for us to look at, and right. Here are some questions. Can the grant proposal approach be used in the workplace to source funding for projects? Yes, in your workplace you use the same call, but of course this detail that I'm giving you now is much more than what you would ever be required to present within your workspace. So you will find that you probably don't need to have the same detail for your work. And folks, the amount of money involved always changes things. So some people will have apply for a grant that's worth 10,000 Rand. You probably would not write 50 pages for a 10,000 Rand application. You need 3 or 4 pages. So you prioritize what you do. But when you apply for 120 million Rand, then those same priorities that you had become extended. You give much more detail about the spending, give more detail about your expertise as a person to manage such a big purse, all those things. I am at this stage now. If I come across a call for proposal in my thematic area, I'm allowed to modify the PhD proposal and submit to the call. Absolutely, you are allowed, and this is a question from Varajo. You are allowed to apply, but I must tell you something. Chances are that you need to substantially change it, because a proposal written for an academic journey that earns you no money is very different from a proposal you write to convince people to give you money. And it's literally that same question that people have, that they say, oh, if I have my dissertation, can I just take parts of it and turn it into a journal article? You can, but the chances are you are going to have to change it substantially, because the two things are written with a different intention for different audiences and different forms of English. Then another question here is, what can I do if a grant maker says that they can only fund half of the required amount? Where can I find grant calls and how to search for them? I think that example that I've given you with grants.gov is one place. Tomorrow's job is to do much more of that, so that will come up. But if you call for a grant and you are told that they can fund half what you've asked for, it's a bit of a judgment call. If you say, yes, I will accept half, then you are suggesting that you overcharged to begin with. So there's the trick. Or you can say, I am willing to do this work, but there's 1 or 2 objectives that I now will not be able to do because I only have half the money. And honestly, it's all about a judgment call. And many a time when they offer you half, you are in a position to actually request to have an engagement with them. So you can meet someone, talk to someone over the phone and say, look, how do we reach a compromise? So it's something workable, but just remember the dynamics that are involved. Which institutions offer research grants in Africa, South Africa? Folks, there are no universities. And when you say institutions, I'm assuming you're asking what universities. Doesn't work quite like that. So universities themselves don't offer grants. They don't. They will have access to a governmental run set of bursaries. The places that offer grants are usually trust funds, private companies that make loads of money and need to find a way to demonstrate social responsibility, all companies and all sorts, but they all use websites that are like the home for these things. So that example of grants.gov is a typical home where people put as many grants as possible under there. Hirus thanked me for the presentation. This is my pleasure. In grant writing, can you include vehicles if you feel that you might need them to complete your study? The answer is no. Folks, grant applications are about what they perceive as necessary. And it's about parsimonious. So if you're asking to have a car, when you can actually ask for support with petrol or with support with funding to use an Uber, then you are not being parsimonious. And unfortunately, and this is an unfortunate space, Africa as a whole, and we are the recipients of grants, so we tend to be the continent applying for grants as opposed to giving them. And we have unfortunately got into a space where people have been given negative perceptions, because the minute they apply for grant, they will ask for furniture, for a car, for things that outlive the project, as if they are sort of asking for long-term assets just so they can exploit what the grant opportunity offers. So many grant offering agencies will refuse to buy assets or refuse to buy certain things, and that their view is based on the trying to manage the misuse of funds. So yeah, I hope that I've assisted in responding to that, Mfundo. Folks, we are at nearly at 7:30. I think we have done well for the evening. Tomorrow we shouldn't spend this long, really. We have just the final bits around taking this theory that I've shared with you about grant writing and turning it into practice, sharing some tricks that you do to manage this journey. Yeah. Thank you. And then there's Diana thanks me for my patience in presentations and my explanations, and they thank me for being the face of UNISA in doing this. It's an absolute pleasure, and it's actually a strange coincidence. Many of you will know that I am the project leader. I was meant to recruit people to do this under me, but for a range of reasons to do with students insisting that they have preferences for ex-facilitator, which turned out to be me most of the times. I've ended up here, but if the original design had been followed, I probably would have done one session out of all of this. So it's kind of a fortunate accident, but I thank you for that, and I hope you know, I am useful in many ways, more than we expected. But everyone have a good evening, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Just one final additional element. I have been going on about the fact that we will provide facilities to review your work, where you email things and we look at them. We are finalizing a great many contracts right now with all sorts of professors and staff to assist in that process. But I'm sure you will know that not every professor has the temperament, patience, the level of expertise to actually deliver meaningful feedback. And the process of us selecting people to do that is tricky. Out of 20 applicants, we might see only 3 or 4 people that we think would make great engaging partners with you. So trying to get the right people has meant we lose a bit of time, but once we have the right complement to this program, then we'll get that ready. I think we are 3 weeks, 3.5, 4 weeks away from being able to say, please send something onward to us, and then we give you the type of feedback that we think will build you. Thank you very much. I hope we'll continue this conversation tomorrow, and I wish you all a great evening.